This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we mark the launch of Monocle's new paperback, 50 Ideas for Building Better Cities, by talking about adaptive reuse with Jonathan Tuckey. We also head to Copenhagen to find out how one supermarket brought art and design to the masses. Plus, we visit an exhibition bringing craft to a new corner of London. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Hello and welcome to today's program. Now, if I sound a little different, it's because I'm in Paris at Monocle's new bureau in the French capital. Why? Well, we're celebrating the launch of Monocle's newest paperback, created in partnership with French construction specialist Saint-Gobain. Called 50 Ideas for Building Better Cities, it is the fourth in our companion series, and it's packed with 50 essays on everything from the design of the perfect news kiosk to the need for a local butcher, baker and candlestick maker. It also features a piece by British designer Jonathan Tuckey, talking about how we can better use our existing building stock. Jonathan joined me in the studio to talk about this approach, which is called adaptive reuse.
Whenever a building is commissioned, it's out of date almost by the time you open the door. So it quite quickly needs to go on and evolve and adapt and accommodate the new use that might come along. I'd say adaptive reuse can be applied to buildings, it can be applied to rooms, it can be applied to materials or bits of furniture. It's just finding a new home or new life.
What do you think has shifted in recent years in terms of a waking up to the beauty and the benefits of it?
I think the kind of gloss has come off the lure of the new, and the reality is that working with existing things and finding new uses for them can have a real beauty and can produce something that's more complex, more layered, more idiosyncratic in its configuration. It still can be tailor-made for you, but somehow the art of collaborating with something that's already there produces something that's maybe more hybrid or more complex than just starting with something that was new and a one-off and is almost immediately out of date by the time it's finished. And that element of the existing is the component that is the surprise. When we see buildings that have gone from gasometers turned into homes or homes that have turned into towers, it's that collaboration of the past, the history and the new that produces this beautiful contemporary space or building or object.
What's the value to that approach? What does it give the people that use the space or give the city?
It gives the person an immediate narrative in that space. If the building has come from one use and is being transported into another use, or come from one era and being transported into another era, you've immediately got this layering of culture. Buildings are a manifestation of culture, and if culture is always changing, then buildings need to change. It just becomes a richer, more thoughtful backdrop to the activities or the occupations that are going to exist within it. It's, in a way, an art of compromise. As the designer of those buildings, you have to accept certain things that exist and what they bring and start to bring the beauty out of those things. But also for the person who's going to take ownership of that space, use it as a home or as an office, they become quirks that are added delight or beauty to your everyday lives that you wouldn't have immediately expected a buttress to be flying through the room because it's the side of a church and now it's going to be a dining room. And suddenly that space becomes almost a special space in a room that would be forced or contrived to put it in a new building. But when it's something that is already there and you're having to work around it, it produces something of memory, of specialness to a space that almost starts to bring some particular definition to how a space might be used or what it might feel like.
To me, it feels like that intangible thing that so often, if you're starting from scratch, you're trying to introduce to a building, whereas this is almost just capitalising on what's already there. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Exactly right. And so often in a new building or in a brief for a new building, people are desperate to sort of grapple onto these ideas of how can I give this space soul or how can I give it this element. What they're really grappling for is an existing building that's got it, the dramatic nature of how you might radically remodel or repurpose it. That sense of it having been there before and having had a collective memory that might be applied to it, or a former history or a narrative. And it's those things that I think provide very rich spaces for our new restaurants or for our new homes or for our new bars in a city.
How do we determine which structures to keep? Are there some where it's like, okay, no, we need to raise this, or does every building or every existing structure have potential? Is there a way we can kind of determine what to adaptively reuse?
Everything has got a value. There will be collective memory about that was embodied within that building before you've inherited it. There will be the materials that it's made out of or the energy that was gone into the materials that have built it. You then need to overlay that with the ambitions and agenda and aspirations of the owner, the client, the new occupier of that building. And the task of the architect who specialises in adaptive reuse is to bring those two ambitions together, the ambitions of the building with its materials and history and purpose, and the ambitions of the client. In a perfect marriage, there is a way in which those two things can fit together, and the building can still have some essence of what it was before, but it can nonetheless be quite radically altered, adapted for its new use or new user. There are times when, if the building is particularly poor condition or the ambitions of the client are completely unaligned with it, then those two things are hard to marry up. Too often that is seen to be the case, and I think that's wrong. There is a post-industrial revolution culture that new is good and old is bad. If we intellectually think about it for more than a second, we realise that's complete rubbish. But we're nonetheless peppered with that message throughout everything we do. That does pervade through our buildings, but I think with a bit of thought and care, we realise that there's great value in those things that we've got. Handed to the right design team with enlightened clients, there's absolutely no reason why there isn't value to everything that starts off as a building to be able to be quite radically and excitedly reimagined. Not protected in aspect and not expecting we're all going to live in the past, but to use the things that we've got and bring them into the future.
In my mind, heritage listings can be great, but they can also be restrictive, and they can actually stop a building continuing to live up to its potential. Is that something that factors into what you're doing?
If you put all the buildings on a kind of shelf in front of us on a spectrum, on the far left-hand side we've got these protected heritage buildings. In the middle there's buildings of quality, of interest, of nature, not protected, and then there's the ones that people deem to be useless and ugly on the far right. In a way, the world of adaptive reuse in the middle is quite well established. There's been a great amount of enthusiasm and talent invested in new identities, new vernaculars for that type of building. Problem areas are the ones at the two extremes. Whether they are super protected buildings, you have this blanket of lazy intellectual regulation that's placed over them that says you can't do this, you can't do that. It protects them from being the very beautiful buildings that they were in the first place. So you get this absurd idea that a building has been protected because it is embodiment of 300 years of change, and yet they won't let you do anything to it. That seems to be an anathema to the very reason that they've protected it. I think that needs to be much more critically thought of, greater rigour to the arguments around the listing. Too often in the past you've had buildings like that which have to remain leaky and cold and uninhabitable because they are good examples of architecture. There would be many very innovative, beautiful and exciting ways in which you can improve a building of that quality or of that heritage listing without changing it, but nonetheless bringing it into today's quite essential performance in terms of its thermal performance or regulation. At the other end of the scale, the ugly, lazy ones, they're the ones that kind of get knocked down. That's where we have a real problem because people bring in whether they like or don't like something, and that's really unhelpful terminology on those buildings. Really, they just don't understand them. With a bit of time and with a bit of almost winding back to the clock of just how did those buildings come to be like they were, having a greater appreciation of them, there can be a good chance that there's something in there that is of beauty, of value, of merit, that then can be added to, altered, adjusted, so that you've made something beautiful out of something that was previously considered ugly. Those are the ones that also really fascinate me, because someone would approach us almost shamefully with this building and say, oh God, what on earth could I do with this? It's just an absolute horror. No, give us some time. Let us peel back the surfaces of find the materials. It might be that things have been boarded up, or windows that were there people have forgotten about, or the ambitions of the original builder or architect have been obscured. With some time taken just to reflect on the building and understand it better and try and remove prejudices of like or dislike and trying to appreciate it, we can find great value and resource in those buildings to get people get excited about them again.
My thanks to Jonathan Tuckey there, and Monocle's paperback book, 50 Ideas for Building Better Cities, is available at all good bookstores now, or online at monocle.com/shop.
Do you want the tactility of print and the speed of digital? Well, sign up for a Monocle subscription today and enjoy 10 issues plus 4 annual specials, as well as access to the Monocle Digital Editions. The Monocle Digital Editions offers improved access to the magazine on the go and at the touch of a button. It also includes our extensive archive of global reporting and a growing roster of travel guides and tips too. Head to monocle.com/subscribe to sign up now.
Established in 1886, Irma was a high-end chain of supermarkets in Denmark. A stalwart of the high street until the brand ceased to exist in 2023, it played a key role in bringing design flair to supermarket shelves in Scandinavia. Its distinctive blue check pattern coffee and iconic Irma girl logo had such an impact that the Design Museum Denmark in Copenhagen has dedicated a whole exhibition to the brand's beloved graphic elements. It's over to Monocle's Copenhagen contributor, Gabriella Delasanti, who went to the museum to find out how Irma brought art and design into many people's daily lives.
When you arrive at Copenhagen's Design Museum in the heart of the city, one of the first things you'll notice today is a tower of packaged coffee. Many Danes will recognize the product immediately. Its bright blue hue, a white grid running across its surface, and the word blå, Danish for blue, spelled in capital letters across the rectangular box. The coffee is one of many products that the supermarket Irma became known for over the years. That's because the company not only focused on a high-quality offering, but it paid particular attention to the design of its packaging. This resulted in a rich catalogue of well-designed products. In an unexpected decision spurred by a growing cost of living crisis, Irma shut down permanently last year. It was Denmark's oldest grocery store and the second oldest in the world. The decision was a surprise to many, not least to the head of the Danish Design Museum, Anne-Louise Sommer, who decided this year to dedicate a whole exhibition to Irma.
It has been so interesting to see how our guests meet the exhibition, because it has been so popular and it has been like a memory lane for them to see. And I think this is essential for an exhibition like this, because it draws on so many personal memories. And of course it goes for me as well, because I have lived with Irma since I was born, more or less. I still remember when I have been like 7-8 years in late 60s on the way to the 70s, when I went with my parents to buy in, really large of things in a very new Irma store in Charlottenlund, north of Copenhagen. And it was really like entering another world, because it wasn't comparable to anything. Even though I was just a kid, I had this understanding of it was unique design-wise. It was actually beautiful to enter the store, and everything was such nice and neat, and the high level of service from the employees. The packaging, everything was so well designed, so even a child could immediately resonate with this design universe.
It would make sense then that the exhibition is not only about Irma as a business or about the impact of its closure, but rather about how it established a unique design culture which made Irma more akin to a lifestyle brand than just a high-end supermarket chain.
We wanted to pay tribute to a supermarket who have been driven by design the whole way through, and that's a unique story. So it's not about business as such, but about design culture at large, as you see it exposed in a supermarket. We tell the story about the very beginning, when the first store paved the way for Irma as a supermarket chain. So that is one line in the exhibition. Another is deep dives into different themes, such as Irma and graphic design, Irma as culture, design culture, Irma as introducing new products, Irma as innovative agents. And this gives you an idea of this very unique position in a Danish, and I will almost say global context, because it has been driven by art and design as part of the product range in a unique way.
Irma's appreciation of good design was evident in their line of products. The supermarket worked with specialized graphic designers to craft packaging that would stand out, bringing well-designed products into the everyday lives of many Danes.
When it comes to the product range, it's quite significant that Irma, there were two elements. They had their own products exclusively for Irma, and then, of course, they had other things like well-known brands. What goes for their own brands was that they always had a very nice graphic design, so you actually immediately noticed it was from Irma. Grape tonic or lemon, or it could be a milk or so on. You just had this kind of very immediately readable, clearly communicating message. It was often with a smile on the face, and it was flowers and nice things, so you had this kind of confidence with the products. In many ways, they were done by good designers. They were always teaming up with someone who was quite specialized. Of course, it reflects the time. I mean, in the 60s and the 70s, it was very much maybe up art, maybe graphic design in a constructivistic way, or pop art. It was like small work of art in an everyday setting.
The attention to design over the years went beyond simply crafting beautiful packaging. Irma, in fact, became known for its collaborations with external designers, selling a range of items that, in many cases, turned into real collector's pieces.
Irma started to invite artists and designers to do a decoration of the plastic bag. So instead of just having something you use for once and then throw away, it became collector's items. And it was also a combination of very well-established artists who did these fine art drawings, and then up-and-coming young people. So they became a platform for young designers to become well-known in a broader audience.
In some cases, these partnerships extended to established fashion and product designers who collaborated on a range of different designs that went well beyond food packaging. This became a legacy in Danish design history, where Irma made the works of well-known designers accessible to many.
Irma's product range is not just about food and beverage, etc. It's also about a lot of other things connected to lifestyle in different ways. One of the things was a wide range of toys for kids, and a popular thing was the Irma doll from the 1970s. Quite a modest doll. You could buy it very cheap, actually, but the cloth itself was done by famous Danish designers. So that's also a good example of how Irma really contribute and make accessible good design to people with not so many means and not just high-end audience, but it became part of the Danish design legacy, where design is actually accessible for most people.
For Monocle in Copenhagen, I'm Gabriele Delisanti.
The exhibition, Irma, A Design Story, is on at Design Museum Denmark in Copenhagen until the 20th of October 2024. Finally, on today's program, we head to the City of London, where two exhibitions are showcasing contemporary craft in office spaces open to the public. The first showcase, 5 and 20, celebrates 5 years of the Brookfield Properties Craft Award and 20 years of Collect Art Fair. The second showcase, Halima Cassell, is a solo exhibition celebrating one of Britain's leading contemporary sculptors and winner of the Brookfield Properties Craft Award 2024. In fact, we met Halima briefly back in March, when she won the accolade at the Collect Art Fair. This show's producer, Maylee Evans, caught up with the artist, whose work borders both craft, art and sculpture. But first, we're going to hear from Saf Williams, Curatorial Director for Brookfield Properties Europe. Saf began by sharing how Brookfield Properties began working with the Crafts Council on the prize.
We collectively came together with this idea that what we would do is we would celebrate a maker that was best in class in UK craft, that was innovative, that was doing something really special. We would purchase works that they had made newly for the Collect Art Fair and acquire them for the National Collection, but we would show them in two of our spaces in the city around a kind of retrospective show. I got to show the best in craft, but they got to add to, this fundamental collection for the country. Reception spaces or public plazas are really good spaces to show art because you're not necessarily going to a gallery. I'm going to go to the Tate today, I'm going to see this exhibition. You might just be coming to work or visiting somebody, but it's like really beautiful to have this conversation starter and to see some work in a place that you might not expect. One of the questions that came to me sometimes was, why this artist? What is going on here? And I think craft was a beautiful way to start with people investigating, how is this made? And then who made it? And then why did they make it? And you peel back the layers of the onion in that way, but it starts with a questioning of the making and the process. So it was sort of a perfect fit for us, and it's a highlight show for us, and it's been very popular. Halima Cassell's showing in 30 Fenchurch and 5 and 20s at 99 Bishopsgate. Brookfield Properties have always shown artworks in corporate spaces, in and around them, so in both receptions and in the public plazas that are outside of our building. People expect kind of an experience, whether it's from restaurants or there's this idea of like experience economy in some ways. And I think showing art in offices is a brilliant way of using the space in a more kind of meaningful and exciting way than just a thoroughfare up into an office. Whilst it's untraditional, for me, it's no reason to stop showing an artist, in the office space. We have, in the City of London, over about 16,000 tenants just in the building, so it's a huge audience. And a lot of those people are connected to culture and arts anyway, but perhaps they wouldn't go to see Halima's work at Joanna Bird Contemporary in Chiswick, or they might not have gone to Collect Art Fair, so that people feel not just like, what is this here? And I don't understand, and I feel disconnected. We really try and open it up, and accessibility is important for us. We did a report in 2022 called Art of the Workplace, and we know that people respond a lot better to working at the office when they're surrounded by culturally enriched environments. 64% of people feel that when they're in the workplace and they're around culture, that it actually helps them work more effectively. It's a great place to kind of engage people.
I am Halima Cassell, and I was the winner this year at CLET with the Craft Council. With that came this exhibition, which is beautifully curated by Saf. I've got my large installation, Virtues of Unity, project that came about in 2009. So it's an ongoing project which is continuously growing. Each design for each vessel, there's 53 at the moment. Eventually there will be nearly 200. Each sculptural vessel represents a country and is named after a different virtue. The vessel form is quite an important form in a wide range of cultures and is one of the earliest forms of man. I'm trying to do a vessel so that every country of the world will be represented in this installation, and the idea is that we all come from the earth, we all go back to the earth, and clay is like a material that has that feeling of the earth, and as a human race, and connecting the idea that we are all the same as a human race, but what differs us is our colour and texture, same like all these clay bodies in the installation. With the naming each one after a virtue, I think regardless of religion, culture, our background, status, we all have the same virtues no matter where we come from.
What are the newest additions?
There's a clay from Luxembourg, the red terracotta with the white residue, and then there's a UAE clay. Each clay is normally gifted by people who want to participate, or if I go anywhere, I get the clay myself as well, or dig it out myself. It's a nice project that people can get involved in as well. Each story of the clay is collected, so eventually there'll be a book at the end of the project which will tell the story of how each clay was obtained and who got it and why they were in that country.
For any listeners, are there any particular countries you're still looking to get clay from?
Well, I have a website which is dedicated to the installations. There's a map of clays that I still need to get clay from. In the next couple of months, I'll get clay from someone who's gone on holiday in Nepal, a friend who's coming back from Portugal who's driving back, bringing me some clay what's locally dug out by a farmer. I've got some clay coming back from Colombia, from another potter who's going to see families. So the installation's constantly growing, and there's lots of venues that it will travel to around the country and eventually be travelling abroad.
With each clay, it comes with its own challenges. There's different compositions, whether there's bits kind of stuck in the clay. Are you working with this raw? Are you treating it before you're working with it?
The clay I try and work with as it comes if I can. Sometimes the clay is literally dug out the ground, so it's completely raw. Sometimes it's been slightly refined where all the aggregates are washed out of it, and sometimes it's been completely refined and it's been bought from a pottery shop where the clay's been used for more consistent kind of purpose. So the clay could be in 3 different stages. The Costa Rica clay, and that's come from below a waterfall. What comes into the waterfall is from volcanic ash from a live volcano. So you can see some of the volcanic ash in that. So I've used that as raw as it comes from there. But I think the people from Costa Rica add other clays into it to make it more plastic.
Incredible. Let's talk a little bit about your wider practice, because although we're looking at a lot of ceramic works here, you also work in concrete, you've made seating and decorative elements. Your style carries through all of these different materials. How do you approach working maybe in concrete, for example?
I love a challenge. When you push your practice or you challenge yourself, it fires that kind of ideas for new designs. But as a whole, the concept of my work, no matter what material, is the same. I always design first, make the form, map my design on as accurately as I can, and then start carving into it. The difference with the various materials that I use, whether it's wood or stone or concrete or clay, is that the tooling's different. Each material has its own limitation or different possibilities. So those limitations and possibilities add to how you think about the design.
For you, it's really key that you've got this hand-drawn element, and even for the concrete pieces, you don't work on the computer. You're sort of hand-drawing these designs. So.
Yeah, I'm very old-fashioned in that I've never built a great relationship with computers or technology, so everything I do has to be done by hand, all the designs done by hand. Making and feeling the material, whether I'm making a maquette for a bigger sculpture or I'm working with different manufacturing company in granite, a wall installation, everything. I do the maquettes and then my designs are very clear to the manufacturers.
You've got this new book out, 25, reflecting on your practice and the developments over the years. What has that process been like? You know, looking back at maybe some of the earlier pieces that you'd made and the leaps and bounds, or actually, does it feel very different to where you started?
The early work and the work today, there's a great connection, but you also can see the development through that with the exploration with new materials, the scale, and the more confident I've got with the material, so it's got a lot more heavily carved into, or it's got a lot more challenging in the way I've structured it. Before 2007, my work was very controlled and angular and regimented, but having that element of working on the wheel, which I never did before, and having things flying off the wheel, and then allowing those distorted forms to be the inspiration for the designs, where before my design would dictate the form. I'm looking forward in the next couple of years to develop working in glass. It's something that I wanted to do in my early stages of my career. But I've always had that yearning to work with glass a bit more closely.
We're in a very busy building at the moment. What is it like sort of having your work on display in this manner? We've got a lot of thoroughfare happening here. It's also open to the public.
But what's more beautiful for me is coming here today and listening to the people who work here and getting their response and saying how much they love the work. That's really important, because art should be for everyone. It shouldn't just be for art lovers or art connoisseurs. It should be for the general public. And if you can capture the general public's intention or curiosity, then I think for me that's when art really has ticked all the boxes. Good design, good art. It's like a beautiful piece of architecture. There's lots of buildings you walk past, but then every now and then you get one what stops you, it forces you to interact with it or to walk around it. And for me, that's what I try and achieve with my work.
Halima Cassell, and before that, Saf Williams, in conversation with Maylee Evans. 5 and 20 is on at 99 Bishopsgate. And Halima Cassell's solo exhibition is on at 30 Fenchurch Street in London. Both are on show until the 26th of September 2024. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans, with help from Tamsin Howard. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.